This is work that has, it's building on, I would say, a decade of work by IDEA members around the really thorny area of impact measurement and monitoring and evaluation for development education, for global citizenship education. So we're really happy to have so many people joining us, and you're really welcome. Um, I'm just going to present the agenda for this morning before I hand over to my colleagues then. So basically, we're having some welcoming words right now, and we'll have some housekeeping shortly. And then we're going to be joined by Rory McKiernan, our CEO, just for some, again, introductory words to welcome everybody who's joining us. I will then present the theory of impact itself in brief, because we are aware that some of you joining are, very familiar with the theory of impact for global citizenship education, but some of you will be new to it. And it's important to understand, I think, the theory itself and the model we've created in order then to understand the tool. Then my colleagues Lizzie and Rudy will present, I suppose, the tool itself. And we're really pleased then to be joined by our colleague Anna Larcher from Jean's Secretariat. And Anna will share a few words about the importance of measuring impact of GCE from Jean's perspective. We'll have some questions and answers at the end. Please feel free to pop your questions into the chat as we go, and then we'll have some closing words. We hope to finish up this part of the launch by 12 midday, and we'll just take a short break then before some of us will reconvene for a training on how to use the tool. But we'll explain more about that once we finish this session. Lizzie, I'll hand over to you now.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Lizzie Noon. I am the Capacity Development Manager of IDEA, and I've been working very closely with the Theory of Impact tool over the last while. But just to go through maybe some housekeeping this morning, obviously we follow the DOCA's guide for ethical communication. So there will, as you know, this session is being recorded, but we'll also be taking screenshots for our social media this morning as well. So just to let you know that, if you really don't want to appear, please let us know. Right now, if you could put your name, your affiliation, and your pronoun in the renaming option on Zoom. And if we could ask everybody to remain on mute during the presentations, and please use the chat throughout for questions and answers, because it's going to be a quick hour before we go into the training. I'd like to welcome our CEO, Rory McKiernan, now to maybe say a few words, and particularly a few words of thank yous. This whole process has not been about IDEA creating this. This has been created by the members. So I'm sure Rory will have lots of thanks. So thank you, Rory.
Thanks, Lizzie. Welcome, everybody. Céad Míle Fáilte, you're all very welcome. I'd love to know where everyone is joining from. I do have a little bit of a sense. I know we have people from throughout Europe and throughout Ireland, north and south, east and west. So yeah, thank you for making the time this morning to be part of this. And indeed, many or most of you have already been part of this process and have been more than that, been instrumental to the process. However, there are some new people here that are maybe also new to IDEA. So a little bit of background. We're over 20 years old now, I think 22 years old. And we're a key strategic partner of Irish Aid, focused on strengthening capacity of the development, education, and global citizenship education sector. And we might also add in education for sustainable development. So essentially, we're a national network, all island on both sides of the island, both jurisdictions, a leading voice in the sector with over 100 members. That would be organizational members and also individual, many of whom are here today. So very much we're an ecosystem covering formal, non-formal, informal, across the lifespan of learning from young to old in all classes, all walks of life. And I suppose that's a key aim, is to ensure that GCE reaches people across the spectrum. And obviously, as you've already heard, members do use a range of terminologies. Some people also use global education. So we won't focus too much on terminology today, but you also may be aware of the Code of Good Practice that IDEA uses. There's lots more information on that on ideaonline.ie. And that's very much ensuring that our members are very much focused on good practice that is rooted in looking at root causes and critical thinking pedagogy around GC. And obviously all of this is aligned to SDG target 4.7. So I suppose part of the backstory here is we know that this work works well. All of you know that for the most part that this work works well. We hear stories, evidence, anecdotal evidence every day of the week. We have reports, we have evaluations, but often we come at it from different ways, different approaches, different terminologies. And I suppose we do have sometimes we have opponents, sometimes we have people that might be critical or even cynical or even cautious. And increasingly, in a kind of cost conscious environment, people want to know, well, is this worth investing in? Can you show me the proof? Show me the evidence? And we will say, of course we can. But across the sector, we've been had this challenge to find a common alignment to measure, to demonstrate, and to communicate, but not to be so rigid that we take all the good out of something magic and make it so defined and so rigid that it loses its essence or indeed its soul. So the challenge, no small feat indeed, that everybody's been involved in here for a few years now, is to come up with a theory and then a model and a framework that we can deploy. And I suppose really about to test and to pilot. So we're not pretending here that we found the panacea to everything. This is very much a pilot. But we are very confident in the next iteration, and with your support, we will be testing it in a really robust manner. So I won't speak for too much longer, but I do want to say like a massive, sincere thanks to the key staff team, particularly Elaine and Anya, who has left IDEA now to move on to Brussels, and now Lizzie, her successor, and everyone in the team that has fed into this and championed it, but also then the wider membership that have been instrumental in the task forces and groups that have met. It's not always glamorous kind of work, sometimes a little bit thankless. And it's really the kind of behind the scenes crunchy stuff that needs to be thought through. And that's what brings us to a moment like today, is all that kind of intellectual sweat and debate and deliberation. So it genuinely is hugely appreciated. And that includes Susan Galway, the consultants that have worked on it, Rudy O'Reilly, and everybody else that has been part of it along the way. And a huge thanks to our funders, Irish Aid as well, and indeed Troker and Concern, for supporting us in all of this work and also encouraging us, and I suppose giving us a kind of a supportive environment to explore it as well. And I suppose this is a kind of a win-win for everybody, where funders, member organizations, others hopefully across Europe, across the world, will be able to benefit from this, so that we'll be able to show the massive evidence and the massive bank of stories, statistics, evidence out there of why this works and why it is so necessary and so urgent in this moment of climate collapse, of division, of polarization, of rampant racism, of a real existential emergency, when development education, education for sustainable development, GCE, has never ever been so important. So this work really brings us to the next level, and hopefully will act as a key point in helping attract new funding, new resources, to give it the proper due credit, support and investment that it really needs to reach people across the spectrum. So thanks very much everybody for being here today, and to our speakers and to all of you who have helped make this happen. So I'll hand back over to Elaine, and thank you again.
Thanks, Rory. So my role really, I suppose, is just to sort of present the theory of impact for GCE model to you all. As I said, it's fundamental that we understand the model in order to then understand how the tool will work. And this, as I said, this work has been going on for a very long time. I'm not going to kind of set out the steps that brought us to this point today, but they're really well documented on the IDEA website in terms of how the theory of impact itself was developed, and also all of the work that happened before that in terms of desk reviews. We did case studies, we have done results framework training and toolkits. So it's all there on the IDEA website, and I'd be very happy to talk anybody through it or to share any learning from that if anybody wants to follow up with us after today. But I just want to present kind of 3 key learnings that we've garnered in IDEA from the work with our members around measuring impact. So the first one is really related to a simple results chain. And this is usually how we describe what we put into the GCE process, I suppose, and what comes out of it within a project timeframe. So, simply put, your organization does something, the target group gains new knowledge, hopefully changes their behavior or practices, and there's a change in their situation. But we came to realize that impact comes after this. We can stand over the results of our work, but measuring impact is longer than this simple results chain. It's off the screen from what we see here. And we realize as well, like it's really important not to just focus on what we do, what we input, like the activities that we run or the resources that we developed, but to try to understand who is doing what differently as a result of our GCE work. So that was one of the first kind of, I suppose, might sound simple, but really understanding when impact happens. The second thing is really linked to the vision of the theory of impact for GCE, and it's about understanding how social change happens. And again, this might seem very obvious, but we just started to, really the statement that social change requires more than just a simple one-off intervention. So many GCE and development education activities can be seen as a one-off intervention or workshop, and social change requires much more than that. The good news is that systemic social change requires multiple interventions, and that can only be done by a network of organizations. So we want to see people throughout their lives and across all settings that they come into, whether it's education, volunteering, working, traveling, that they're receiving the same GCE messages or messages at least embedded with the same GCE values on a repeated basis. If we think of any sort of, a campaign to influence how people think about something, you're going to need to make sure they hear that message many, many times. And again, this can only really be done by a network of organizations. And that made us, I suppose, really happy to think about, okay, how can we harness the collective impact of what all of the IDEA members are doing? The third thing then is trying to understand what we can actually influence. So kind of combining the simple results chain, which we have some control over, and then the fact that people need to hear these messages multiple times in multiple settings in order to really change their behavior and their thinking around global justice issues. And we found this diagram very useful. So it moves through a circle of control, what we directly control in our GCE work, to a circle of influence, and then finally a circle of concern. And we came to learn, I suppose, that the really big social change that we want to work towards is happening in that circle of concern, and that we need to try to find a way to show the kind of contribution of GCE work to that much wider picture of social justice, environmental justice, and so on. So understanding, I suppose, what we can control and what we can't also was really formative for the theory of impact model. So after kind of all this learning through different settings, the IDEA staff, training workshops, our quality and impact group, various groupings of members coming together, we agreed that we need to approach impact measurement as a network in order to identify collective impact. So going beyond a project timeframe, going beyond a single donor's project, going beyond a one-off intervention. And again, that's just really important in terms of then presenting our theory of impact model. So the theory of impact for GCE, which was launched by IDEA at the end of 2025, it's presented in this pyramid model. And I'll just talk you through it in brief. The pyramid model kind of reflects this circle of control, influence, and concern. So the basis is our guiding principles, and that's really around quality, GCE, and what the activities themselves should look like. And then the first level after that are intermediate outcomes that we're working towards as a sector. And those intermediate outcomes are categorized with three different groupings. So one category focuses on educators, and that's educators from, early years, youth workers, community development workers, university lecturers, anybody who has a role in delivering, let's say, GCE activity to a group of learners. The second category then in the blue in middle is the category of learners. So they're the people that we work with. And sometimes the educators and the learners mix or cross. They can be, in IDEA, our learners might actually be educators. So, there's a little bit of overlap between those two categories. And then the third category in green on the right-hand side are the kind of organizations, the partnerships, the kind of settings that we work within, the kind of structures that we have around GCE. So there's several intermediate outcomes that aren't detailed here, but I'll come to those on that kind of first level. And then they contribute to one long-term outcome for each category of educators, learners, and organizations. And then finally, this is all feeding into the collective vision that we have, and which I will read out. So there's two sides to this vision. One is that people in Ireland drive action for a just, sustainable, and interconnected world, navigating it with civic courage and critical thinking. So that's really focusing on individuals and communities. And then the second side of the vision is that policies, practices, and systems in Ireland reflect GCE principles, building a fairer and more sustainable society. So that's kind of focusing on, the more complex structures and systems that we work within. So that's the pyramid itself. You'll see that this first level of intermediate outcomes is not detailed on the pyramid because it would just become too big, but I have them on the following slides. And you'll see, for instance, that the first long-term outcome around educators, then it's here on this next slide, and the long-term outcome is up in the left-hand corner, and then that's complemented by 5 intermediate outcomes for the educators. And that structure then is reflected for learners, which has 1 long-term outcome and 3 sets of intermediate outcomes. And then finally, the organizations, again, the 1 long-term outcome from the pyramid model, and then 6 intermediate outcomes. I'm not going to read through them all in detail. They're all available. We'll share the slides afterwards. But it's really important that now we understand, I suppose, that the levels and the intermediate outcomes are really crucial, because that's how we're going to gather data from the IDEA members to feed into our tool. And I'm going to hand over to Lizzie, who's going to talk us through the tool.
Thank you, Elaine. Thanks so much. So having worked in the sector for quite a while now, I'm really excited, as I said, that we've, kind of finally come together and seen different work from different sectors all come together. And I guess this is one thing, and you probably got that sense from Elaine as well, of kind of standardizing our interim outcomes, but not as we dig deeper into the tool as well, we'd be looking at kind of standardizing indicators. And that's really so that we can show a proper collective impact from the whole entire sector. This is just a little snapshot because I leave the wowing to Rudy, our colleague for the last couple of months, who has patiently listened to our concerns and helped us build this fantastic tool as well. So that's just a snapshot. It's based on the Sankey diagram, and all will be explained. And those who are attending the training will also see. So you can see there, just from the snapshot, we're looking at those long-term outcomes of educators, learners, and organizations as well. So we can really build that full picture as well. So as we explained, the vision level is that high-level change. Now, because this is the quality of this tool depends on the quality of data that's being put in. And as time goes on, that's where we will really have more information for that vision level as well. So, and at the vision level, we will gather the evidence that suggests how we expect GC to help create that systematic social change, as explained with the visionary as regards the people and also the policy change. In time, we will draw on a variety of relevant evidence as it becomes available. So that will include data from educational institutions and funders and future research to support the theory of impact progress towards this vision with evidence. But at the moment, it is about our members and the GCE community coming together to show that collective impact. Some organizations will work with just educators, some organizations will just work with learners, but really I think all organizations work on 3 levels of organization, educators, and with learners as well. It helps IDEA members to place the outcomes of their work into a much broader picture of impact, and we will collate and analyse the data gathered for the interim outcome level, which we'll go through now. It's hoped, and already even with our brilliant advisory group, can I just say an extra thank you to the advisory group that has been working with us tirelessly since January to develop this tool. So already we have some data in our tool from their good quality testing, I guess, and with the pilot we're hoping that 30 will come in. So then we'll have the impact of 30 organisations. We'll present it in a way that best illustrates the progress towards long-term impact via our online data visualization tool. I guess when we think about it, we are putting our greatest hits from GCE into this tool. So really showing what we are doing, and so it's the greatest hits, I guess, of GCE that are going into this tool, which will really, really help to show the impact of the 14 outcomes that we have identified. So you probably had a quick look there. So, for example, the learners are based on heart, head, and hands. So that's easy enough for people to think, how am I influencing people's hearts, heads, and hands through this? So it's really identifying who's doing what differently as a result of our GCE interventions. And we will talk a little bit, maybe, I know that one question that you may have is between the code and the theory of impact is the code shows us how we do it, and then the theory of impact is really showing that impact and what it's doing. So I guess I suppose, looking at the kind of form of quantitative and qualitative results that you have already. We all have so much data already through our results frameworks, through our annual reports, and through our submissions of the Code of Good Practice. So really what this impact tool is doing, which is, I would say, very easy to use, is gathering that information so we can put it into a way in which it's showing the impact and not only how we do that as well. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Rudy, who I'm going to thank again profusely for particularly the patience in which he's worked with everybody and taken on board all of our comments, taken on board all of how we work as this sector. Because when you think about it, we're working in a sector from, the youth, from adults and community, from post-primary to primary. So there's lots of different sectors to all bring together, and albeit as well the informal education sector. So thank you, Rudy, and thank you again for your patience.
Thank you very much. Thanks a mil, Lizzie, for that. So look, lovely to meet you all. My name's Rudy. I run a data visualization studio called Data and Design, and the last few months I've been trying to understand the difference between impact indicators, intermediate outcomes, and going on what's been a really wonderful journey with that kind of steering group that we've had. So like Elaine and Lizzie have both said, there's going to be a training for some of you in the second half of this call. So this is not going to be a comprehensive look through the kind of tool that we've built for this pilot study, but rather what I want to give you is kind of like almost opening Pandora's box in terms of like my design process and why we've kind of designed things the way we have. But I suppose just to say that it's being done so in a very kind of iterative, collaborative way with a lot of not just but ideas members as well. And I can see some of those friendly faces on this call who are involved with shaping this. So I suppose like when you will get access to this website, you kind of have three main aspects to it. We're going to be looking at exploring GCE impact. That's in the impact section. We're going to be reporting on your own impact and organization. That's in the survey section. And then there's a variety of materials like that, some of which have been presented already, that we'll capture in the supporting info section. So I'll briefly touch on these two, but really I'm going to spend most of my time that I have allocated here showing you some of the visuals we have around impact. But first, around supporting info. So this website will be it's going to be a one-stop shop for all things theory of impact. So we can access the model that Elaine showed us earlier. We can go in as well to some of the intermediate outcomes. So this is an interactive way that we can explore some of those. So these were the 15 or so different intermediate outcomes that Elaine introduced earlier. And the last thing in that section are what IDEA are calling impact indicators. So within each of these outcomes, we can look at like what are some things that we can actually measure across different organizations. Because I suppose one challenge here is that like if we want to show collective impact and we're showing what everyone's doing in a slightly different way, how can we then show collective? So that's being the real I suppose the real challenge working on this project is how we combine the qualitative and quantitative. How do we allow people to, capture some hard numbers around what they're doing, but then not just make it completely about the numbers? Because then if we do that, we lose the actual, the stories and people actually changing their habits and outcomes from that. And like Rory said at the start of the call, I don't know if we've solved this definitively, but we've created something iteratively with the help of our members that we think it's going to be a really nice way to kind of, I suppose, show that collective impact. So yeah, so these are we've got within the tool, we've got the kind of supporting info. We have the survey, which I'm really not going to touch much at the moment. I'll just show you briefly that, like, one, you can click on it and come through and start, filling out this information here. Like we said, this pilot will be for IDEA members only. And after this half of the call, Elaine and Lizzie will be taking some of you through training about how we use this. But essentially, it's not like, all the data is being captured on the platform. It doesn't like send you to a survey monkey or anything like that. And we quickly kind of moved away from things like that because we saw the depth and complexity of the questions we needed to ask, and also the interdependence between some questions. If you ask this, we should send you down this way. If you answer this way, we should send you another way, and so on. So I'm not going to touch on the survey too much. I'm just checking the chat. Oh yeah, so yeah, Lizzie just said that the survey will be explored in training. So I'm not going to take us any further through the survey, but rather just tell you that this is where we fill in information in the survey. And information can be filled in at an organization level about your organization, which is really useful for IDEA to understand more of its member base, and then around the outcomes. And that's really where we're reporting on the global citizen education impact. Okay. I'm also talking very quickly because I've quite a short slot to get through all this. All right, so let's get on to my favorite part. The reason it's my favorite part is that I run a data visualization studio, and visualizing this data around these different levels of the model has been a huge task because we've got huge amounts of information going from long-term vision. I misspeak every time I talk about this model as well. So even this 5 months in, still haven't got it down. But we've got the long-term vision to the long-term outcomes to the intermediate outcomes. And then within each intermediate outcome, we might have an activity, a workshop, a different organization. And it just becomes this huge, like I started trying to create these, like, maybe spider diagrams, but it just became this massive mess. And I was like, how can when we show that to funders or we show that to the public, how do we do it in such a way that it's not just, we're not just showing people a huge, massive spider web or like those kind of, people who are cracking a serial killer case with the post-its and lines between them. So how can we do that? So I'll get to the fun part. So what we've done is we've kind of created a visualization based on something called a Sankey diagram. This diagram was invented by a man from Tipperary in Ireland, actually, back in the 1800s. And he was a mechanical engineer like I used to be in a past life. But really, Sankey diagrams are just a way of showing flows. They're normally done left to right. We're doing ours vertical, and I'm going to explain why. But what we're looking at is we can look at flows of a particular quantity going down between long-term vision, category, intermediate outcome, all the way down. Now, when I say a quantity, what do I mean? Well, the quantity can be different things. We can look at this collective impact in terms of total hours. So this is the total hours that have been inputted into our tool so far of participant activity, right? So we're not saying that the total GCE work done in Ireland or wherever this year has been 300 hours. Absolutely not. And that's why we want to run this pilot study first, so we can capture some of these results and then go out to funders and to the public with these results. But we can look at this in terms of total hours. So we can see we start at the total, then it breaks down into educators, then it breaks down into the intermediate outcomes for educators. Or I could switch this if I wanted to something like participants. And now we can see the difference here where we're seeing the different participants across each of these intermediate outcomes and areas. So we're able to actually control what what people are actually seeing as we explore this diagram. So the width of each of these bars is determined by what is it we're looking at. Is it hours, participants, and what we even have is within each of our indicators as well. I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole because I'm barely able to survive the rabbit hole myself. So I'll switch back to total hours. So what we're looking at is there we start off at a high level, so total long-term vision. We can then click into things like category. So that's our educator or learner or organization. Within each of these, we have our intermediate outcomes. We can see in these two, like for the steering group, it's a small, tight-knit group. So we haven't got submissions across all of these intermediate outcomes yet, right? We only have them across a couple of them, for example. And then within that, if I click on an intermediate outcome, I can come down to a particular organization, right? And I can kind of drill all the way down to see what has each organization run. I can do that again here, right? So I can click on a different intermediate outcome and then see the organization there. And the idea here is that like what we wanted to do was create something that will let us kind of see the collective, which is at the moment is showing the hours, showing showing hours or showing total participants, but also let us drill down to actually like look at the individual, right? So taking this particular challenge. Okay, so now what we can do is we can take one particular activity that somebody did, click into it, and kind of get a sense for what it is that was done, right? So this is a submission that somebody put into the tool. We can see on the map where it happened in Ireland, and we can see the hours that were done, when it was done, and so on. Another thing I should have mentioned is that we can also see this on a what I call a breadcrumb, but it's basically seeing where did you get to, what did I click on to get down to where this is. And the idea is that we can always flip back and forward, right? And the whole concept of how can we go from individual to collective impact is that I can do that jumping back and forward at any level, right? So not just down at the bottom where we're looking at one particular activity. I can click on educators and look and say, okay, for educators overall, what's going on across Ireland and GCE, right? And at the moment, we can see like a lot of the activities are more Dublin focused, but again, we haven't had a massive amount of submissions. So what we hope is at the end of this, you kind of build up this wider base, this wider base of knowledge around Ireland. And we can start seeing things like participant quotes, right? So now we're kind of getting a sense for like, here's what people are saying about the work that IDEA's members are doing across educators across Ireland, right? So I suppose to recap, and it is hard to do it in a short space of time, and we've put in little explainers and hand-holding things within the tool, but essentially we can kind of go from high level impact all the way down as granular as we want. And at any point we can switch over to a view which shows us like, okay, what am I looking at right now? For example, there might be, I might be looking here at critical reflection and positionality. Let's look at critical reflection and positionality, which is one of the intermediate outcomes. And here's what some of the quotes that are coming in from that intermediate outcome. So a little bit of handholding needed, but I think this way we've got a huge amount of power to be able to go from high level all the way down to low level. The last thing I want to show you is that we can also filter it. So you're all working across different, education sectors, you're all across different organizations. We can change that here, right? So for example, you might be interested in looking at the impact of post-primary education. We've got that there, primary education and so on. So we've got a huge kind of power at our fingertips in terms of how we can kind of manipulate, play around with and look at this data. I'm sure you'll have plenty of questions. Hopefully those questions would be addressed by the training today. But the hope is that at the end of this pilot project, with many of you getting involved and inputting this data yourselves, this is going to build a much larger, much more nuanced, much more powerful picture of the impact around the work that folks are doing. That folks are doing in Ireland. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm going to come into the chat because I haven't been looking at chat messages, and I'll stay here replying to any of those. So thank you.
We are delighted to also have with us today Anna Larcher from Jean, who's going to say a couple of words, I guess, on like what the importance is as well for the entire European sector and the importance of the theory of impact. So Anna, just to give you a little bit of a background. So as you know, and for those who don't know, it's the Global Education Network of Europe, and she's in the Secretariat, where she leads the research to policy work, supporting policymakers with research and bridging research and policy towards better research-informed policy making in global education. She holds a PhD from Imperial College London and is a researcher at the Centre for International Studies. Her research focuses on the evaluation of international development, critical development perspectives, and global education. She has also taught in the African Studies and International Development Studies programme at the ISCTE in Lisbon University Institute, where she has sought to support critical and decolonial thinking. Anna has extensive experience as an international consultant, working across Africa, Europe, and Middle East for UN agencies and the European community and other international organisations, supporting the planning and evaluation of development projects. She's also worked with CSOs across research, evaluation, and project work. Her work on global education is strongly informed by all of these experiences. God, we nearly, maxed out our time with your brilliant CV, Anna. We're delighted to have us and very much aligned with the work that we're doing today. So welcome. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much for this extensive introduction. And thank you really very much for the invitation to be here today. And I would like to start by passing on apologies from Liam Wegiment, which is the director of GEAN. He's traveling this morning, so he couldn't be here today. But both Liam and I wanted to congratulate IDEA and IDEA members on the launch of this theory of impact tool. And we truly believe that this is an achievement worth celebrating, and I'm really truly impressed with what we have seen so far. And we really think that this brings us closer to what we have been trying to do in GEAN and with GEAN members for a long time, which is to really better understand the collective effects of global education and to demonstrate its transformative power. And I just want to share with you some reflections done from the work we do in GEAN on evaluation of global education. So, as you said, GEAN it brings together ministries and agencies that we in the field of education and foreign affairs, and we have over 25 countries represented, and we work with the policymakers to facilitate policy learning, peer sharing, and to support their work in global education across multiple dimensions. So from this work, we know that evaluation is really a central concern in global education. And this is clear in the number of evaluation processes that are conducted in various European countries and which GEAN has been documenting over the years. And you will find it in publications such as the State of Global Education, which you can access in the GEAN website. And importantly, in the European Declaration on Global Education to 2050, the Dublin Declaration, which represents a shared consensus among European countries on key priorities for global education, one of the commitments is precisely to support the development of monitoring and evaluation approaches that are relevant and that are more appropriate to global education. And this was a priority in the development of the Dublin Declaration because there is a broad recognition that the existing evaluation models fail to capture all these complexities of the transformations that global education is seeking to promote. And several GEAN countries have been actively exploring and are trying to build alternative models of evaluations for their own programs in global education. And GEAN has been facilitating this reflection on the evaluation of global education, and we're trying to broaden the debate to include other ideas, other models, other methods that may be more appropriate and useful to understand global education. And this builds also on a reflection that Jean has been engaged on in evaluation almost since its inception in 2003. There was a conference in London on quality and evaluation, and we've continued this work. And recently, actually, we developed a paper which I just learned this morning is going to be published on the 1st of July together with a publication. And for this, Jean brought together academics, civil society actors, including IDEA, and policymakers to explore where evaluation in global education stands today and where it needs to go. And across a variety of perspectives, we identified a set of shared principles. And these principles call for evaluation models that embrace complexity and predictability, that account for the creative potential of global education, and that focus on understanding processes of change from the perspective of the actors, that value subjectivity and the qualitative dimensions of evaluation, embracing multiple methods, and also that see evaluation as a research process, as based on experimentation and critical reflection. So this brings me to the work conducted by IDEA, the theory of impact, and this tool presented today. And as you can see, it is very much aligned with several of these shared principles. So for us, it's important because it offers a model to capture all this complexity and collective transformations without reducing the depth and the complexity. So we really believe it's an important contribution for this debate, for this exploration about better evaluation methods. And for Jean, it really offers an important model to share with other countries and organizations that are trying to rethink evaluation. But, just to close, I would just like to remind ourselves that this work is not just about evaluation. It's also about harnessing the collective and transformative power of global education as a force for change, as Elaine said earlier. And as people working in global education, we all share at the moment concern that the values at the heart of our work are increasingly under threat. And Rory highlighted this in the beginning. And I was listening recently to an interview with Judith Butler, and she was saying that the right is doing now a better job at appealing to the passions of people and in particular to their fear and hatred. So this is the moment for us to be engaged in collective imagining of a better world. And she added that for that we need an openness to learning about how global networks of power are working, and we need to be producing our own networks of power that have ideals and imagination at the core. And this, as we all know, is exactly what global education does. So I think ultimately this is why this work, your work, matters here. And so I would really like to congratulate all of those involved, IDEA and IDEA members, for this really important work, and encourage you to continue to inspire us, to share it with us, and to take this work forward. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna. Really grateful for your inputs and anything that Jean can help us with to, refine the tool as we use it. We're really grateful for your expertise in that as well, and also amplifying it and sharing with partners around Europe. So thank you so much.
In our agenda, we're going to go through mainly, I think I mentioned in the first part that it is mainly about the survey and how to fill in the survey as well. We can't iterate enough that it's this all depends on the quality of the data that you put in. It is about, you're really, really celebrating your successes, celebrating your your impact that you've had and the things that you're most proud of as an organization. So we're going to go through the organizational profile, which actually the great thing about this is that this only really needs to be filled out once. Then we're going to go through like your outcomes and how you, I suppose, show your impact vis-a-vis the outcomes, the 14 outcomes that we set out. We're going to go through the indicators, and then we'll go through what that looks like then in the impact tool itself. Brilliant. And it's literally an instant thing that happens, which is quite exciting. So I'm going to pass you over so that's just a little bit about the login. As I said, really, really easy. And I'll be showing you directly the tool and how it works, which Rudy shared with you just earlier on. But yeah, so when you go into the tool itself, you'll have, as Rudy showed you, there's 3 options. So the first one obviously is where you see all of the results of all of your impact, and where he showed you where you can change like the way that you see things, whether by participant or total hours, etc. There's the survey, and then there's the supporting info. So both really, really important. We would advise maybe to kind of go into the supporting info first, just to familiarize yourself as well on on the theory of impact if you haven't done so already. Our group of advisory group, so big shout out again for them. They've seen this, may have seen this before, but they have already kind of filled in some of this data. But yeah, definitely the supporting info is a good place to start. So then when you go into the survey part of it, so just to go back again there, so yeah, supporting info there for just information. You can find information on indicators, etc. But then you click on the survey part, which is the one in the middle, and you'll come to 2 different tabs. One is the organization and one is the outcomes. So the organization tab, Elaine is going to go through now. And this is the one that I said you only really have to fill this out once. And this allows for when like it may be that different people in your organization are filling out the survey, so you can, it doesn't have to be that one person. So maybe the first person is the one who fills out the organizational profile, and then after that people can come in. It also saves maybe if there's like people changing roles, or like people have moved on as well, that all of that data is there already. Great. So let's start on the survey. So I'm going to pass you over to Elaine now, just on the organizational profile. And Elaine, just give us a nod now when you're ready to.
Yeah. All good. Thanks a million, Lizzie. So yeah, as Lizzie said, this only needs to be done once, which is great. And I suppose the rationale for gathering information about an organizational profile is that in IDEA, we do gather this information in different ways, sometimes through our annual member survey and sometimes through a survey that we do after the grants. So the Irish Aid grants, we survey members who apply for the grants, and then we do gather some information on their profile when it comes to GCE. So now we're kind of going to do it in one place, which we do think will be quite useful. So when you go in, you'll be prompted, first of all, to just search for your organization. So all IDEA members, organizational members will be there. If you're missing, or if there's an issue or you're misnamed or something like that, you can let us know, but everybody should be there already. So we can go to the next slide, Lizzie, thanks. And basically, you'll need to have some details to hand. And I would say this is really important for all of the theory of impact too. Like, gather the information that you need beforehand, and then it should be quite quick to fill in the survey. And then you'll have also this training and this recording that you can listen back to for particular sections. But for the organizational profile, you'll need to have the following. You'll need to know the annual budget in your organization for development education or global citizenship education across all donors, okay? Or, the organization's own income. So the actual full budget spend for GCE. You'll need to know the number of staff in the organization and full-time equivalent. By that, we mean you calculate based on a full-time role. So for instance, in IDEA, I work 3.5 days per week. That's 70% of a full-time role. So you calculate the number of staff based on that, and then the percentage of time that staff spend on development education or global citizenship education. The other thing then, I'll come to the last one first, which is the sectors of education your organization is active in. So we have a list there, there are things like early years, primary, post-primary, higher education, adult education, further education, youth work, initial teacher education. So there's a list of sectors there, and you can choose as many as you like. And then finally, the GCE programs of your organization. This is really important, and we will come to this throughout the survey, but you're basically going to be reporting on activities within certain programs of work. And a program is really just a set of activities or a group of activities. But I suppose the programs are where we want to gather the results of work. An activity like a one-off workshop or an event or a resource can all happen within a program, but the results really should be happening at the level of a program rather than an activity in particular. Okay. So you'll see there, that's kind of just what I've talked you through. That, under the organizational profile, this is a screenshot here of the different educational sectors, the salaried staff members, the percentage of time that's dedicated to development education work. And that can take a bit of figuring out. And sometimes it is a bit of a ballpark figure. You mightn't know it for sure, but hopefully if you ask somebody, who's a senior leader in the organization or maybe works in finances, or if you're big enough to have maybe a HR person, they can maybe help you to calculate that. As we said, you only need to do it once. So it's really important, I suppose, that we're as accurate as possible. Then the organization programs is here. So as I said, a program is an ongoing body of GCE work run by your organization. For example, a global youth program, a transition year module, a teacher training program. In IDEA, we would say the Code of Good Practice is a program that we run, and the theory of impact will be one as well. So we're just going to invite people to add an example maybe of a GCE program from your organization. So let's kind of hear the types of organizations and the types of programs that you run. And like some of the common ones in Ireland would be the Concerned Debates program. I'm sure lots of people are familiar with that. And Eco-UNESCO Young Environmentalist Awards might be another. So we'll just give you a minute just to try to, pinpoint a program in your organization and to add it to the chat. And if you can maybe add your organization's name as well, that would be good. Thanks, Anita. So Concerns Transition Year Academy, volunteer program in Trocra, Education for Sustainability, climate literacy, great Worldwide Global Passport, great Trocra Game Changers, brilliant. So lots of them coming in there. So, just try and, I suppose, quantify how many separate or distinct programs that you run. And sometimes activities, can be spread across more than one program, but it's good to kind of think about that and maybe agree it if you have colleagues or a team, agree it in terms of how you're going to capture it in the tool. I think we can move on, but feel free to keep adding those examples. So I'm going to hand over to Lizzie now, because now we're going to move on to the outcomes part of the survey, which is very crucial, but this also includes details on your activities. And as I said, if anyone was or most of you were at the launch, the details in the activities is really vital as well, because we want to be able to verify I suppose, the results that we're showing and the impact that we're showing as well.
Great. So like Elaine explained, for the organizational profile, you will need some things at hand. But I think we got across in the launch that really we have all this information, and we all have so much data from, various annual reports and results frameworks, etc. So we have that all already. But I guess, just leading on from the programs, it is really important to fill in that sector. Now, there is an option that you can add a program, but the more, I suppose, uniform that we keep it, the greater impact we can show. But I guess the name of the activity and the program that it's linked to is what you'll need. So thank you so much for the brilliant programs that you put in, the duration and the time frame of the dates. And this is what I really like about this. And I guess this was as a result of working with an advisory group, and a very robust advisory group, is that we took into consideration either it could have taken place within a month, so that's okay. So it's not bound to a certain year. So it could have been a program that took place, say, in if you're in the formal sector, between September and October, say in the first term. So you're able to kind of really, really calculate that as well. And then accumulatively, we can see from a year or from a school year what's happening. Your target group and optional demographic information. So if you've collected, say, data on breakdown of gender and age, etc., you have an option of putting that in as well. Again, that can throw out more results as well for us as a sector to be able to see. If you can, and this more than likely comes from your results framework, would be like a baseline, a target, and a result for that particular activity. So say if you do, let's say that the TY program from Concern, which was put in the chat there, I'm just pulling that one out. So you had maybe 20 students in the last kind of year, and that was like kind of your baseline, and then your target this year is for kind of 30. But you only maybe have got 25. So that's like, an example of kind of 3 different numbers that you're putting in as well. But you'll definitely have that information at hand. And then you select an indicator from the Theory of Impact tool. So Elaine will go through the indicators. But basically, in order to, if we were to have gazillion indicators, the way with all different wording, we wouldn't really be able to show anything. So what we have done, and what this was a big part of the work of the advisory group, is standardize a lot of indicators so that they're relevant to you as well, so that you can just pick one. So we've made it, I think, very easy for you guys to be able to fill out this information. So when you get to the outcomes part of the survey itself, as I said, we use your strongest examples, and this is where so it's different from the organisation tab. You've done that, and as I said, once that's done, it's anybody can fill in this part. Not that you want it, everybody filling it out, but I think it's handy in whoever is maybe associated. You might have different people working on different programs, say, for example. So then that way, the person working on that program can put in the results that they're most familiar with as well. So briefly describing your activity, it might have been like a workshop that you did, it might have been a residential, etc. So just briefly describe what you were trying to achieve with that. And if for some reason, so this is where I suppose that the organizational profile and the outcomes intertwine. So when a drop-down menu will come down, and which of your organization's programs is this activity part of? But if it's not there, you also have an option of putting in that. So it might be that the person filling out organizational profiles maybe didn't have that GCE program within there. But just maybe double check with the person who did, so to make sure maybe it's connected with one of the programs they put out. So what in the list, say, would best describe this? So it could be a webinar. So we have a drop-down menu for that. And I think it's quite an exhaustive list of of the types of activities that we do in the GCE community, and describe your activities location. So that's either online or in person, or a hybrid blended learning. So the total duration of the activities in hours. So if you did, maybe it could have been, the example there is really, really good. So you did a 10-hour training course that attended by 80 people, but you just counted as 10. So you did 10 hours with those 80 people, and how many sessions were part of this activity. So it could have been just one, it could have been, a one-off workshop, or it could have been within 3 sessions. So here at the very end, just the time. So say if you did something really big, a big activity in this month, May, and you just put in kind of the same start and the same end date because it happened in that month. If that's okay. And then the same would go, say, for a one-off workshop, etc. Great. So, sorry. So how many participants took part in this activity in total? and then which sectors were they from, were represented. So it would be fairly straightforward. Say if you're working in one particular sector, you'd be able to just say, okay, they were all from the formal education sector, and that's it. But you might have, like, particularly I think with community and adults, you might have them coming from all different kind of sectors. Or if you're doing something maybe in the informal education space as well, there might be a variety of different sectors that are represented at your activities. And then this is where I guess, like, if you did collect demographic information like age, gender, location, etc., from your participants, you put in yes or no, and that's, it will lead you then into this screen where you can, like, put in your information. And if you say no, obviously it takes you straight to our indicators. So I will pass back over to Elaine briefly. And as I said, just to remind you as well, this is very much an open space. No question is stupid because, like, we've been totally embedded in this process for the last 4 or 5 months. So there's probably things that, like, we're missing that you want to express. So please feel free to unmute or put in the chat your questions. Thanks, Elaine.
No worries. Thanks, Lizzie. I was going to say the same thing, like we can pause for a minute or two, because I know there was a lot of information there in terms of outcomes and activities, and that is really the bulk of the data you need, I suppose. So if there are questions, feel free. One thing I would say as well, like we sort of, like, we went back and forth so many times over the questions. The advisory group were brilliant. Rudy was brilliant in trying to make sure we were getting the best info. And even things like the duration of the activity, like we felt that was really important to understand the depth of the activity as well. So if somebody has a one-off intervention and it's a full day, or if it's an hour, like there's a big difference in that in terms of the GCE experience that the learner or the participant will have. At the same time, for the organizational category, we needed to be able to capture things like meetings with political actors or meetings with, like-minded organizations or movements. So we really we tested it so many different ways. I'm sure there's still things that we can refine and improve, so it's never perfect, but hopefully it's good enough. And it won't feel overwhelming once you've seen it a couple of times and you've had a chance to go through it yourselves. Don't think there are any questions, so I can keep going, but like, don't hesitate to pop your hand up or put the question into the chat. So the indicators, then this is a really important part of the tool, because as Lizzie said, if everybody is reporting on their activities with different indicators, we won't actually be able to collate very much at all. So we've had a go, and the advisory group, again, was instrumental in this, and so were the IDEA staff, in formulating indicators for each of the 14 intermediate outcomes that we have. And we're basically asking you to choose the indicator that's best aligned to your indicator that you're tracking. So sometimes there's a lot of confusion around indicators, and I put that in just as a kind of reminder to us all. It's really important that we get the indicator right, because that's how we will analyze across the sector. If you're doing your activities, you're describing your programs in a way that you describe them within your organization, and it's slightly different to how I describe them in my organization, that's fine. The indicators is the crucial part. So basically, an indicator is something that just indicates whether or not we're making progress towards our intended outcome. So, Susan Galway, who a lot of you will know, has developed this results framework toolkit. She was a predecessor of Lizzie and I in IDEA. And she sets out really clearly, I suppose, how to craft and develop indicators. So all of the learning, I suppose, that we have really comes from Susan's work and, the quality and impact working group in IDEA over many years in terms of how to craft an indicator. And the example that she always uses is that if your child is unwell, or somebody that you're caring for at home is unwell, not feeling great, not eating, maybe not sleeping well or sleeping too much, one of the first things you'll probably check is their temperature, because that's an indicator of their overall health. It won't tell you exactly what's wrong with them. It won't tell you what to do, but it will give you some sort of evidence towards, whether or not you need to take them to the doctor. So I just think it's really important that we always make sure that our indicator is helping us to identify any progress that we're making towards our intended outcome. In the RF toolkit, which I've linked there, there's lots of information on how to develop them. Not that we want you all to go off and develop other indicators, because we do have a ready-made list, but if you're trying to understand the thinking behind them, or you want to articulate them for yourself, you're absolutely welcome to do that and to look at that resource. And we have a training recorded on the website on it as well. So basically, as we said, we're aiming to use common indicators as much as possible. And that means that most of us are going to have to compromise to some extent on the language within the indicators. So in the indicators, for instance, we always use the word educator. We don't use the word teacher. We don't use the word lecturer. We don't use the word youth worker, because straight away we would end up with 3 different indicators if we were that specific. So you basically need to find the indicators that align best with the language that you're using. They probably won't be a direct match, but the ones that you can align your work to or align your indicators to. At the same time, if you're really struggling to create indicators, this might be a great resource to have, because then actually you can look through some of the indicators that we're using for the theory of impact tool, and you can kind of, adopt them into your own work as well. We'd be delighted if people find them that helpful and can use them in that way. So when you go through the outcomes, focusing on really that data that Lizzie went through for the activities, then you need to select an indicator that shows how you're measuring your outcome. And sorry, Lizzie, just go back a second. Basically, there's three options when you do that. Sorry, there's 2 options. One is to select one, and we're going to go through those now. If you really feel strongly that your indicator is clearer, better, more aligned to the outcome, and you want to suggest your own, you can. And what happens, we're actually going to review them internally in IDEA to see, okay, are these useful for the theory of impact overall, or is it really just for this one specific organization? We'll probably suggest aligning it with an alternative that we have already within the tool. Or if we think, wow, this person has really cracked it, this indicator is much better than ones that we've created, or it plugs a gap maybe that we didn't realize that, that was within the theory, we'll accept it and add it to this bank of indicators that everybody can view. And we'll show you those now. So on the supporting information within the theory of impact tool, you'll have the full list of indicators, so you can also look at them before you decide which one you're going to go with. As I said, there's kind of 2 or 3 indicators for each of the intermediate outcomes. And here there's examples here. So here it's showing you the outcomes. So there's 2 outcomes there. One is around critical reflection on positionality, and one is around materials. And then there's indicators within that. Okay. So for instance, you get them when you click into that, you get the full text of the full intermediate outcome. So the critical reflection on positionality is kind of the headline. You'll get the full text of the intermediate outcome, and then you'll get the associated indicator. So this is evidence of educators recognizing their privilege and complicity in global justice issues. So it gives you a lot of scope then to describe the results, I would say. Like, the indicators are, I think, general enough to cover a lot of different activities, but also specific enough to show progress towards the specific outcome, which is really important as well. And there is a mix of quantitative and qualitative indicators in the tool itself. So this obviously is a qualitative one. It's asking you for evidence of something, but then there are ones like number of, percentage of, and so on. These are the ones within organizations. So that 3rd category of the theory of impact model. So it's just showing you four of your outcomes there. You can select the outcome that you want to align your activity to, and then you can select the indicator within that. And you'll see at the same time, there's always that option at the bottom. Do you want to add your own indicator? And then that will go through kind of a bit of a brief review for myself and Lizzie to see, okay, do we need to add this to the tool, or can it be replaced by another indicator that people are already using? Okay. And then if you're adding your own indicator, this is what will pop up. It will ask you to select category, the intermediate outcome that aligns to the category being educator, learner, or organization, those 3 pillars of the pyramid of the theory of impact model. And then the intermediate outcomes will pop up within that. So even if you're adding your own indicator, you'll have to align it to one of the intermediate outcomes. Okay. And there, for instance, there's an example there of an intermediate outcome under the category of organisations. So the intermediate outcome is that GCE in Ireland and Europe receives stronger and more secure funding, policy support, and institutional backing. And then there's two associated indicators there. One is the level of funding received for GCE per donor, and one is evidence of GCE messages promoted by your organisation are reflected in policies, institutional discourse, and/or media. Okay. So I'll just pause there again for a second. We're conscious that there's a lot of information. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with indicators. If you're using results frameworks, you'll be drafting indicators annually probably, or refining them. But if there are any questions, feel free. Yeah. Katrina, do you want to feel free to come off? Yeah.
Thanks a million. Just wondering if will you show us the list of indicators on this call, like the full list of indicators, or is that something that we can check after the call?
Yeah, we can show during, actually, we're going to go live, after this as well, just when we go through kind of some of the tools. And in your supporting information, there's the whole list of indicators. So you can go into a specific supporting information section that will show you all the indicators as well. So yeah, it's I guess, if you are, I would advise people to go there first when they go into before they do the survey as well. So you can kind of go, okay, this is what you familiarize yourself, particularly, I think, with the indicators. Yeah.
Thanks, Lizzie.
Great. Over to you, Lizzie, then.
Okay. So now on to the kind of the other information required for the survey. So we're just going to go, the things that you would need would be like the type of tools that you use. So like whether you're using surveys or the types of evaluation tools that you're using. You may have gathered a lot of participant quotes, say either by survey, by using one of these mechanisms, or it might be follow-up emails. We call it anecdotal evidence here in IDEA, which has been really, really useful, where you really chip away with, what people have said in the follow-up, maybe after your activities. So data collection methods, and also, I suppose, to have at hand as well the different web links to the resources or the materials, or you might have, even if it's social media links that to that particular activity that might have photos, that might have videos, etc., and any other relevant information. I guess with this as well, we, in order to, a lot of tools, I guess, would, and results collection would reflect quantitative data. But what we really want to show is, and it does have the ability to show, is that qualitative stuff, those photos, those I suppose personal participant quotes, etc. And to be able to gather that, I think, is really, really important from this. So I guess just following on from our indicators, so you'll be brought to a page around what tools did you use to track this? Describe, I guess, the results. It could be that actually we were oversubscribed. Everybody. It's, I suppose, anecdotal, on what, we had 50 people there. They really enjoyed it, and then we could go on then to I suppose it may be, and I suppose this is one thing about the indicator. So say if you were working with learners, obviously in a lot of workshops or activities, you want to hit their head, their hearts and their hands. So it might be that under, say, heart or head, you would want the way for them to kind of maybe understand their privilege, but then you also kind of want them maybe to take some meaningful action as a result of that as well as an indicator. So the indicators then under the hands might kind of come in there. So then you can add, I guess, that a number of indicators as well, because I know that people will be, and the same with the organization and the same with educators as well. There's a number of indicators in which you're hitting. So again, it's just a drop down menu and you can add in your indicators. For this, just to, I suppose to let you know, so you'll probably have numerous participant quotes. So you put in one, you press enter, you put in another, press enter, etc. So, and hopefully you have like, a good, so really we would say, again, it's back to the, like, your best of and your greatest hits. Put in your best participant quotes that you can here, and the ones that really, that you probably use in your annual report anyway, or use as evidence yourself within your own systems. If there's anything else about that impact of the activity that previous questions didn't capture. So this is more kind of a loose, like, place, like it might be your own kind of, your organization's own kind of reflection maybe on how the activity went. This is a good kind of opportunity to put it in there. So your own kind of self-evaluation of how the activity went would be a good place for this. So again, links now it could be a link on your website, it could be a link, as I said, on social media, to that specific activity, or to the specific program that it's related to as well. That's where you might find that. And then what best describes the materials you're sharing. It could be like, it could be a report on it, or it could be a video or a podcast, a case study, etc. And we really feel that, like, giving this variety, I suppose, of different ways in which we show the impact will make a really, really rich vision when all the data is collected. Well, it will never be all collected, but within a year, I think we will have sufficient data in which we can really, really, like, see the vision that we have for GCE under the theory of impact. Okay, so I'm going to start with supporting info. So again, this is kind of like your landing page after you log in. And because there was a specific question, I guess, about the indicators as well, we will go in and have a look. So as we saw earlier on, that's the model itself. Let me see, we'll go back. And so the indicators. So we'll get to see them all here. So if you can see there, so say, let's look at, if anybody wants to shout out which they'd like to see, maybe if we do a shout out, who would like to see learners? Maybe we'd do learners. Okay. So if you see here under, say, head, level of increased understanding of global justice issues. So that might be like, and you can see them all in one fell swoop as well. But like, again, just on the section around kind of other indicators. So if you're, say, working with learners and you're doing we'll just say a workshop for argument's sake, and you really would like to see a good level of increased understanding of global justice issues. However, you'd really like to see that there's kind of evidence of learners maybe recognizing their privilege as well and complicity in global justice issues. And you may want to see that, like, the percentage of learners that intend to take action as a result of the activities. So I think before you kind of even approach the survey, maybe, like, this is an important section to look into, to kind of go, okay, well, I'm going to put in my example around learners. So what indicators do you think I was trying to hit as well? And it might take a while if you don't have, like, the way maybe set indicators as of yet. And as Elaine said, if this helps as well, maybe with your own kind of monitoring and evaluation, please feel free to use these as well. But this, again, is work in progress. So, it could be a case that we might get loads of indicators after this. So I'm just going to go back. So outcomes equally. So you can see all kind of the 14 outcomes here as well. Educators use tools to identify and challenge systems that support inequality, etc. So we have everything, all the interim outcomes within there as well. So as I said, worth having a look just before you fill in the survey. So I think we've gone through most of, like, what we see. I'll go, like, the way, just again, that's how it starts off. You're in there, you're next, etc., etc. And we went through that through different screenshots. But what I'm going to show you now is, again, just, and Rudy showed you earlier on. This is great because it shows you kind of at each section what is going to happen. So I might ask you, I'll ask those who are brave to unmute, maybe what they would like to investigate. Yeah. So this just shows you all, like, this line shows where you are and to start at. And this is really, I think this is my favorite tab, where you explore and you can see, like, what it looks like on the map of Ireland. And you can see the participants' quotes here. You can see like the total participants that took part. So as I said, all this data, again, thank you, advisory group. You can see like some of their activities so far. They've put in some really, really good quality information. So I'm going to ask you now, just so we can have a little test, so see here, you can change what you want to basically look at. So I'll ask you now, maybe, give us a sector shout out there for maybe what sector you'd like to maybe investigate. So then you can go by the sector that you're working in, say, and then maybe you don't want to see total hours. So most of the data that we have is like, we're basing it on kind of total hours. So really the amount of hours that you've put into it, but you can also see, we should be able to see there the participants. So the total participants that are there as well. So let's have a look. So as I said, this is like, based on the information we do have. So over time, like this map will be completely full. And then when you click onto like so Donegal is very active, I must say. So a shout out to the Inishowen development for that. So the Inishowen development partners, you can zone in right on what they're doing at the adult sector, and then you can discover, oh, actually that's the impact that they've had. They did a 6-week accredited course, and their long-term partners were like, so it was a collective community thing. And then the participant quote is, the world is better off than I think, which is quite a nice outcome from that as well. So you can search really basically under any sector, or if we say as a sector ourselves just really want to see the overall impact, we can do that as well. So say if we are to look at total participants so far, so even with our small advisory group, we're looking at 1,273 people. Let us see, from learners, we can see here that they mostly came from educators, and it was influenced, say, underneath the interim outcomes. So say if we go into quality materials, we'll see that like DICE, so each stage you can click into to kind of mine down like more information into what that meant. So they had a stand at the National Education, and then they had another national education show that they sent these materials to. Let's see, Global Village, and they had a teacher training course, and it influenced that amount of people as well. So within the educators, yeah. Have you any questions about that? Because it is like, as I said, our head has been in this for a couple of months. So there might be, things so I'd love to maybe hear if you think it's workable, or if there's any questions on how we use it. So again, we can explore then in here, then what exactly the detail was. So you're like, well, what did Global Village actually do in order to get this result? Okay. So that is like, I guess, the 3 sectors. So I guess if we're looking at it, we go kind of bottom up, supporting info, like, okay, I got it, fill out your survey. You'll see basically what you've put into your survey immediately. So you can also, when you're in the impact, if you just want to see your own stuff, you can also just see your own stuff. So let me just see. Does anybody want to shout out their own organization that we can see? Those who are on the advisory group, of course. So you'll see there that there's so as time goes on, we will have all of the IDEA members in that section. Right. All good?
Thanks, Lizzie. Yeah. And once you input data into it as well, I suppose all IDEA members will be able to see everyone else's data as well. And I think that will be a great source of inspiration and information, to understand members' work. You'll see in the tool, in the survey, we gather web links to resources that will tell you more about the activity. So it really should be a great source of inspiration as well as, I suppose, gathering the results. I think what's going, we didn't put up the timeline yet for the pilot. I actually forgot to do it during the launch, but I might just show that briefly now, Lizzie, but it's way back up before the training started.
Yeah.
I think it's like slide 22.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
So basically, I might just explain briefly now how the pilot will work, and then I'll just let you know kind of, I suppose, our key messages before we sign off. So basically, as you can see, like anyone who's doing the code of good practice and the theory of impact, like the theory of impact, we imagine is going to be a lot less work because it is really focusing on the greatest hits, as we're calling them. And when we consulted the kind of time frame for the pilot with the advisory group, everyone seemed to agree that you could do it within kind of 2 to 3 months, that you could gather the information that you need and input it into the tool because you're only focusing on a smaller number of activities. And they felt that that was doable. We will be accompanying members. So anyone who signs up to the pilot after today, some of you have already signed up, as Lizzie said, you'll get your login details. And then we're going to organize like a number of check-in points kind of along the way with that group online just to see how people are doing. Any issues with the tool, we're sure there's things that we'll need to change or tweak or reword because they're not clear, like that's inevitable. And we'll have those check-in points over the kind of, it's 2.5 months really up till the end of July. Then in August, we're going to be analysing the pilot data. So there's a few phases to that, one of which is obviously Rudy's work with analysing the data. And I imagine, and again, it would be great, we'll verify this with him, but we haven't finalised, I suppose, the work fully with him for this stage. But I imagine we'll be taking the indicators and the data under indicators for each of the outcomes and kind of summarising what the results are across the sector under that. I imagine at that stage it'd be really useful to get feedback from the members as well on what those trends are and what the analysis is telling us. Maybe they'll, question some of the analysis. Maybe they'll kind of, help us to illustrate it with more detail. And then, as I said, there'll be kind of, I think, a wider kind of research piece. And we'll have to agree then, we haven't done this yet, we have to agree how then to insert that kind of collective snapshot of the impact that we're having after the pilot, incorporate that so you can also view it then on the tool itself. Because at the moment, the Sankey diagram, it's really flowing from the intermediate outcomes down, but we will need to bring in those bigger levels then of the long-term outcome for each category, educators, learners, and organizations, and then the vision, the collective vision that we have as well. So we're working on that in the background, I suppose, and taking Rudy's advice on that as well. And as members then are using it, and as we see what comes out of the process, hopefully, I suppose that will help us to further, define exactly the analysis and how we're going to present that. But we will be presenting it before the end of the year. Like I'd say, we're hoping to present it in October or November, possibly earlier. It all really depends also on the quality of the data that we get. So we're really keen, I suppose, to have a close relationship with any organization that's piloting to make sure that, people take the time to do it, even though, I'm saying it can be quick-ish, but I suppose to make sure you have the right information to hand, to make sure you fully understand the questions. We went back and forth rewording things so many times based on feedback from IDEA staff and the advisory group. And I'm sure they're still not crystal clear for everyone, so just to make sure you do understand the questions and things like that. So again, the data is really, really high quality. So that's kind of the view to piloting. The next steps then are one, I suppose, just a few reminders, like to make sure that you're only including activities that have a really, really strong result. So as we said, the code of good practice is about your practice holistically. The theory of impact is about what difference you're making. And if you don't have evidence to show you're making difference under specific outcomes, you don't include them. You choose the outcomes where you're showing the biggest difference. Because we know we have 14 intermediate outcomes. Not members are expected really, I would say, just to focus on 2 or 3 of those. And that's kind of off the top of my head, but I don't think you need to input data for more of those, because if we have 20 or 30 members piloting it, all of the intermediate outcomes will be covered. And again, covered with really high quality information. Make sure that you can map, your activity onto an intermediate outcome and to an indicator. As Lizzie said, like look at those documents in advance, under supporting documents, to make sure the data that you're inputting will link to an indicator and an outcome. That's really important. And then, as we said, like add things like quotes, the web links to resources or materials, like really bring it to life. Also, so other people can learn from it as well. Finally, then let me see. I thought there was one other thing. We had a deadline, didn't we, for Lizzie, for people to come back to us by, yes, there you are. Thank you. 27th of May. So basically a week from tomorrow. A lot of people have already signed up to the pilot, but if you're still thinking about it, if you want to go off and discuss it with your colleagues, we'll share the slides from today and the recording as soon as we can, hopefully in the next day or two. Again, if you want to kind of mull it over a bit, or you want to, bring it to your manager or whatever to get, backing to be involved in the pilot. So you have until tomorrow week, Wednesday, the 27th of May. You will get a login to log in at that stage, and there'll be a group email kind of explaining some of the processes. We will have group support or those kind of check-ins we mentioned, but also at any time. I think anyone who's been a member of IDEA for a long time will know that at any stage, pick up the phone or drop an email to any IDEA member of staff on any issue in general. But for this specifically, if you have a question on something, if you're struggling, like please let myself and Lizzie know as soon as possible, because that quality information is really what will create, I suppose, a quality picture of the collective impact we have in GCE. So yeah, I'll just pause again there, because we are kind of wrapping up.